Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the cause of Christ among Free Will Baptists all around the world. Today we have with us Dr. Melvin Worthington. He's a longtime pastor. He's pastoring right now, but he is the former executive secretary of the National Association of Free Will Baptists. He served in that position longer than anyone else, and we're so glad to have him here with us today. Thank you, Dr. Worthington, for joining us today from North Carolina.
Good to be with you.
Now, I got a question for you, my friend. Tell me about Wilbur and Alma Worthington. Who were these two people?
They were my mother and daddy. They were married in the early 30s and moved to a farm in Ayden, North Carolina, and stayed on that farm until they passed away a few years ago. I think my daddy died in 2002, and my mother died in about 2000. They were very loyal Free Will Baptists, and they were married for a long period of time and went to the Ayden Free Will Baptist Church.
That's great. And you know, I'm sure that on September 30th, 1982, they sent a check for $100 to the National Association of Free Will Baptists. Why did they do such a thing?
Well, they believed in the denomination, and they believed that it needed support, and they were faithful members of not only their local church, but they gave extra money to the denominational causes.
And our listeners may not realize, but that was the first donation to what we call now the Together Way Trust. And so yes, that $100 is still there and still paying dividends to our national ministries, isn't it?
Yes, sir. And I believe in that as well. And what we did is we wanted to provide some income for future ministries and for denominational preservation, and to that's why we did what we did. Not only did they do what they did, but we did what we did before we left Nashville back in 2002.
Mm-hmm. I see. And so folks may not know the difference between just outright giving to a ministry and taking money and investing in a trust. So what's the difference in just giving $100 to the denomination versus putting something in the Together Way Trust?
Well, if you just give a gift, then that gift can be spent. If you put it in the trust, you only spend the earnings off of that trust, and the principal stays in to continue providing adequate financial resources for generations to come. It's great. A great way to perpetuate a movement.
Yes. And so your parents, as you mentioned earlier, they passed away really several years ago, and they gave this donation even longer ago when we think about it, 40 years ago. But that same amount of money that they gave is still there, but it's been used in ministry over all of these years.
It provides resources for years to come when you take the earnings off of that trust and you do not bother the principal of the trust. It will continue to perpetuate itself in giving year after year after year. And it's a way to provide funds without having to raise money by sending out those who would be involved in fundraising.
Yes, yes. And so if someone really thinks about this, that $100 is there until Jesus returns. The principle is there. And so that particular donation is something that benefits national ministries throughout. So why give, though, to the Together Way Trust? What's the difference in that and let's say other trusts that one might give to?
Well, the Together Way Trust is a trust that is set up to provide resources for financial resources for denominational departments. And this makes the Together Way Trust a special trust as it is related just to the National Association of Free Will Baptists. There is a formula that is adopted each year by the National Association when it's in business session to determine how the earnings are distributed. And that formula is provided or suggested or proposed by the budget committee. And therefore, each agency gets a proportionate, equitable share of the earnings each year.
So when someone gives to the Togetherway Trust, they're giving to all of those national agencies. And you mentioned every Free Will Baptist and every Free Will Baptist delegate at the National Association votes on that budget every year. And so every person that attends the National Convention has a say in what goes with those particular resources.
That is correct. And that's why the Togetherway plan was set up to provide one plan with two methods of support. And the Togetherway Trust was set up originally as the cooperative trust.
Mm-hmm.
And when we changed over from the cooperative trust, we changed to the Togetherway Trust because that is the program that we adopted in 1992 at our meeting in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we implemented the Togetherway plan in 1994. And so the Togetherway Trust is in light of the Togetherway plan, it provides resources for each agency on a equitable basis.
That's good. So you mentioned earlier, this really should be like an offering. You give your tithes to your local church, you support them, and you kind of alluded to how your parents did that. Then you look for other ways that you might give a gift or some sort of a blessing, if you will, offering that's over and beyond. And that's a way that folks might give in this way to the Togetherway Trust.
Yes, I would say you give your tithe to your local church as well as an offering. And then the extra money that you give to the denominational causes, my personal preference is to give to the Togetherway Trust because it provides resources for all the agencies. And I really had a hard time as executive secretary trying to decide which agencies I like the best. So I have found that in my giving, especially if you have an inheritance that you want to give, it's better to give it to the Togetherway Trust so everybody can benefit and you feel a part of the whole, not just one agency within the denomination.
And it helps everyone. It's a bit like if I was at the church and I wanted to just give to the youth fund or something for a musical. When I'm giving just my tithes and offerings, it can be used in always pay the light bill and so forth. And that's kind of the way the Togetherway Trust works. It pays for it helps everything.
Yes, that is correct.
I noticed I believe on your watch or Brother Keith's watch, someone even gave some land that went to the Togetherway Trust. So people have thought of all kinds of ways during the years to give perhaps gifts that came their way to give those back to the denomination.
Yeah, it's a wonderful instrument to be used if, for example, you're left an inheritance, whether it be land or houses or money. It's a good way to give extra money to perpetuate the movement which we believe in and we support. And it provides resources. Many of the denominations that I worked with during my tenure as executive secretary were funded to a great degree by endowments and trusts such as the Togetherway Trust because it provided systematic support. It was not crisis giving, it is systematic.
And in doing so, it helps avert crises, doesn't it? So, because we're prepared, it's kind of a way of reversing, the laborer servant to the lender. This is a way of letting your money work and help our various ministries in many ways.
It's objective and not subjective. It's not done by I believe personally that giving is a theological concept. Mm-hmm. It is not an emotional thing. It is a theological concept that this is what God requires of the tithe, and He deserves the offerings. And I just feel like that if you're going to perpetuate a movement that you care about, then you need to provide, as David did before he passed away, he provided for the temple to be built by Solomon. We need to provide resources for those who shall follow us, and the Together Way Trust is a wonderful way to do that.
Well said. I came from the university system, and we had so many of our projects were funded through endowments and trusts like the Together Way Trust. And so it's something that the world has really taken from the scripture, and using it for their various things. It's important for us to take advantage and to use these instruments as well. But thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Worthington. We appreciate your work with the Together Way Trust and what you and Brother Keith did before us. And we want to encourage our listeners to think about how they might participate. You could call us at 877-767-7659. We'd be glad to talk to you about this, or you could email us at questions@nafwb.org. And we also encourage you to talk to our foundation and look at some of the estate planning that they will send folks to your church and talk to them about that. We'd love to see what we can do as good stewards, really, of God's resources to use those for his ministry and his work. We want to thank everybody for joining us today on the Better Together podcast. Please take this podcast, please share it with anyone you think of. And remember, we truly are better when we work together. Thank you for joining us today.